Hello, friends. Unless you've been living under a rock pretty much the entirety of your life, you know exactly what that intro music means. If you're one of those people that maybe are just a casual fan, turn on the NCAA tournament in March that gets your ears perked up. If you're more of a diehard, by November, you're already thinking about that music. And if you're one of those crazy John Rothstein types that we know and love, you think about it every single day you wake up. I am your host for today's NCAA tournament selection show. No, this is not CBS. No, I'm not Clark Kellogg, Greg Gumbel, and thank God I'm not Seth Davis. Just kidding, Seth. I am your host, Coleman.L.crawley. And if you're asking yourself, man, you look familiar. Didn't you have a co-host with you? Yes, unfortunately, my co-host, who we usually do the Tuesday night highlights, fantasy football podcast where we review the greatest fantasy football league on planet Earth, Dirty Dalton and the Boys 16-team league. We are now 23 weekends away from that draft weekend, the second greatest weekend of the year, only behind the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, Jordan is practicing social distancing. We got to stay, 2 meters apart. And so my roommate, Jordan, is not with me, will not be doing the podcast. Be missing him greatly, but hey, we got to make ends meet. So this is not the Tuesday night highlights. This is not a fantasy football podcast. This is the NCAA committee / selection show. I'm going to be honest. When Sunday rolled around and there was no selection show, when they had already called off not only the conference tournaments, but now the NCAA tournaments, I cried. I spent an hour in my tears, sulking. Then I said, you know what? This isn't about me. This is about so much more than me. And I've always been taught when life gives you lemons, no matter how sour they may be, you got to find a way to squeeze them and make a little bit of lemonade. So that's exactly what I'm going to try to do for you people today that maybe are like me. Thursday is here. We're expecting to watch NCAA tournament games, but we can't because of the coronavirus. We're going to stop that talk right now. We aren't going to think about the coronavirus for the next 60 to 90 minutes in this podcast's entirety. We're going to really focus on our tenses here and act as if I am the selection committee. I will release my bracket, give it to you all. I will run down, make the picks. You all can make your picks at home, debate as well. And we're going to talk as if this NCAA tournament is going on starting right now. John Rothstein is a guy that is my hero. He is a guy that gives out taglines like it's his job. And so my tagline for John Rothstein is, that guy I want to be when I get older. Maybe you guys aren't like that, but that's certainly me. But he pissed me off come, Monday night. Because he had the idea to do a selection show as if the tournament was going on, which I came up with that idea on Sunday, have the text to prove it to my friends in our group message. But thankfully, I watched his podcast yesterday and on Tuesday, and it wasn't exactly what I was anticipating on doing mine. He had a bunch of player interviews, really reminiscing on the 1920 season rather than looking toward the future of the NCAA tournament, right? And so that's what we'll do. Again, I want to be a bright light in this moment as you're quarantined, as you're in your household in the dark. John started his podcast off with a Booker T. Washington quote that goes along the lines of, in order to lift yourself up, first lift up someone else. I have a favorite quote of mine that's something similar. Booker T. Washington, in fact, the school of Bryce Thompson, star recruit that will be going to play for a team next year who, spoiler alert, might be the number 1 overall seed in this NCAA tourney. Stick around to find out. The selection committee will let you know. But anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but Macklemore is the person whose quote that I have. And it goes from a song where he says, I'm losing it here for a second. The quickest way to happiness is learning to be selfless. Ask more questions, talk about yourself less. And that's exactly what I'm doing here today. Put a lot of time and effort into this data, researching these analytics, breaking them down in order to predict what the committee would have done, and also into my predictions and my thought process behind them. Don't have a teleprompter back there reading what I need to say. Don't have an earpiece with guys telling me what's up. This is just raw, natural talent, ability, along with a whole lot of heart. Give you a quick rundown of the agenda, what to expect for, as I've said, this next 60 to 90 minutes. I will be acting as the selection committee. Yes, if your team is not in the tournament, if they don't get the seed line you projected they would, if they don't get a matchup you liked, I have a personal agenda against your squad. You're absolutely right. I will release the teams, their seeds, and their matchups region by region. Once that's complete, then we're going to talk about last 4 in, last 4 out. From there, going to explain the selection process, why I made the decisions that I made, so you have a little greater understanding behind it and that I'm not just throwing matchups out there. Then I'll make my predictions, who will move on, and ultimately who's going to bring home the 2020 National Championship and going to lift up that banner in their arena. And then lastly, going to briefly discuss some potential future conference tourney changes. I feel like this is something that could be brought up given the initial decision by the NCAA to say the number 1 seeds in the conference tournament were originally going to move on to the, like in the Ivy League, for example, Yale was granted the automatic bid without playing the tournament. Is that something we could see in the future? Is that good? Why or why not? Also, should NCAA tournament changes be made as well? Well, without further ado, let's get into it, starting as usual from the top left portion of the bracket. Our number 1 overall seed this year in the NCAA tournament, coached by, sorry folks, wrong papers here, coached by the legendary Naismith Hall of Fame, title ring on his hand, Bill Self, who led his team to a record of 27-3. Yeah, that's right. Rock Chalk Jayhawk, go KU. Kansas Jayhawks, your clear-cut number 1 overall seed. A body of work that simply ran away from the rest of the field really in February and up until early in mid-March. Clearly the front runner, honestly, they could have lost maybe their last 2 and still would have been that number 1 overall seed. For their matchup, they will then play the winner of the Prairie View A&M Panthers with a 17-13 record coming out of the SWAC conference, coached by Byron Smith. They're making their 2nd straight NCAA tournament appearance and 2nd overall for Smith, even though he's been there for 14 years. So, wow, kudos to him. Doesn't make it first 12 years as a head coach. Now has made it the last 2 seasons. They will play in Dayton, Ohio, the MEAC Conference champions, North Carolina Central, a Twitter favorite, social media superstar, Lavelle Moten. For those of you that don't know, he posted a video that if it didn't bring you to near tears, you probably don't have a heart, of his son devastated on senior night, thinking he was never going to see some of his dad's players ever again. And really moving. If you don't follow Coach Moten, go ahead, get on Twitter, get off this video, join back in a second, and go follow him right now. He's that good, really does a great job of putting things into perspective. They this year were 15-13. They were listed as the 68th team in the tourney, according to yours truly, the committee. have now made 4 straight NCAA tournaments in 5 of the last 7, but have lost in the first 4 games 3 straight years now. We'll see if they can get off the schneid this year and have a chance to play the number 1 overall seed, Kansas. But we remember this is the exact spot 2 years ago where Virginia got knocked out by, as the number 1 overall seed, to UMBC. Next up, in the 8-9 game, these games will be played in Omaha, Nebraska, by the way. The 8 seed, this could be an interesting matchup if they move on. The Houston Cougars tied first in the AAC, ultimately didn't win the conference due to tiebreakers, coached by Kelvin Sampson, a 23-8 squad this year, 13-5 in conference play, their 3rd straight tournament. The last 2 years, they've been a little unlucky. In 2018, got beat on an amazing round of 32 buzzer beater by Michigan, who went on to go all the way to the national championship game. If they don't hit that buzzer beater from about 30 feet to get the 1-point win, who knows? Houston, in 2 of their next 3 matchups, would have been playing teams seated below them. Could they have gone all the way to the finals, played Villanova? Maybe. The next year, lose to Kentucky by 4 in the Sweet 16. So Coach Sampson, not that anyone's taking him lightly, but clearly has a program being developed down there in Houston. They will take on, out of the Pac-12, the 3rd team in the Pac-12, 3rd overall this year, with a 20-11 record, 10-8 in conference, coached by Bobby Hurley, the Arizona State Sun Devils. 3rd straight 20-win season for Coach Hurley and the Sun Devils, and 3rd straight year to make the tourney, but have never made it out of the round of 64. We'll be looking to change that this season against Houston. As we go down the bracket, we look at the 5-12 matchup. Out of the Big East with a 22-9 record, the Bulldogs in Indiana, Butler. Coached by LaVall Jordan in his 3rd year. They were 16-17 just last year. Look at this year, 5 seed. Led in large part by senior Kamar Baldwin, a 6'1 guard who's averaging 16 points a game, 4.6 assists and 3.3 rebounds, having a heck of a season. They earn the 5 seed this year. They will play the 12 seed, a team in the state beside them, also out of the AAC, earned AAC champions due to tiebreakers, the Cincinnati Bearcats at 20-10. Coached by John Brannon, his 1st year. He's had some success at mid-majors in the past. The team had made 9 straight tourneys under Mick Cronin and were in jeopardy of missing the tourney. Under Brannon, not a great way to start, but he finds a way to get it done. Let's see if he can make a little noise in the tourney, led by the Cumberlands. Next, as we slide farther down, the 4 seed, out of the Big Ten, a John Rothsteinism right off the bat. Greg Gard, the silent assassin, is their coach. Wisconsin, 21-10 record. Probably the most prominent fan, the biggest celebrity that is a diehard alumni of theirs. It's America's favorite roommate, Big Cat from Barstool Sports. Pardon my take. Check it out. A far better podcast than this one. Something to mention, Wisconsin lost as a 5 seed last year back when they had Ethan Happ. Despite losing Happ, they move up in seeding this year to number 4. They will be taking on a team that has become a staple of late, has been dominating the WAC, 31-1 over the last 2 years in WAC conference regular season play, coached by Chris Jans, who's in his 3rd year, 83-17 over the last 3 years, 83% win percentage. I don't care if you're playing the school of the blind. That's impressive. New Mexico State, the Aggies, they will be in the dance, looking to make an upset. They've been so close the last 2 years, both years as 12 seeds, nearly knocked off Auburn, who we saw how good Auburn was when they went to the Final Four and really should have beat Virginia and played in a national championship game. Yeah, this New Mexico State team had them on their toes down to the wire. Look out for them to have a potential upset over Wisconsin. As we slide further down in the bracket, what do you know? Actually, we'll go down to the 2 seed here. Excuse me, no, we'll just go straight from the 6. Sorry, going a little untraditional here, old school. The 6th seed out of the Big Ten, coached by Pat Chambers, who is in his 9th year at Penn State. First tourney made in 9 years for the Nittany Lions. That deserves a tremendous celebration. What a job they have done. They were tied 5th in the Big Ten this year. You know, many were curious of where they would be in their seeding due to that terrible non-conference strength of schedule at 336. However, when you got wins at Michigan State, at Michigan, at Purdue, a total of 8 quad 1 wins, 13 quad 1 and 2 wins combined, I think a 6 seed is very fitting for this squad, led by Lamar Stevens, 6'8" senior forward, 17.6 points, 6.9 boards a game, really putting this team on his back, trying to see if not only they won't just be satisfied with getting into the NCAA tournament, but can make a little noise, maybe make a little run. Next, we go down. We have our first play-in game in terms of the at-large teams. We have, at 20-12, out of the ACC, they don't have to worry any longer. They barely missed the NCAA tournament last year due to the last-ranked non-conference schedule in college basketball, the North Carolina State Wolfpack, coached by Kevin Keatts, in his 3rd year. Last year ended up with 24 wins, didn't get in. The committee, rightfully so in my opinion, really degraded their non-conference strength of schedule, and I couldn't agree more. This year, they ramped up that strength of schedule a little bit, got 4 quad 1 wins, 4 quad 2 wins, have a home win at Duke, home win against Wisconsin, at Virginia, at Syracuse, ultimately propelling them into the field, but not by much, folks. They will take on the last team that was admitted into the field as an at-large. Little bit controversial. They have an odd resume, but at 18-12, not a lot of teams in the country are playing better basketball than this team right now. UCLA, coached by Mick Cronin in his 1st year, more consistent than a few good men on a rainy Sunday, according to, of course, everyone's favorite, Rothstein. They have had 1 loss since February 6th, and we all know about those teams in playing games and the success that they've had in the past, sometimes not just winning 1, not 2, but 3 games getting into the 2nd weekend. Could the Bruins, behind Coach Cronin, with that consistency, do just that? Next up, 3 seed out of the SEC, coached by a staple. This is a blue blood here. Of course, I'm talking about the Kentucky Wildcats. Coach Calipari in his 10th season. One thing to note, no Final Four since 2015. I know most coaches would love to say, hey, I made a Final Four 5 years ago. But for Kentucky, who had a stretch of making 3 out of 4, including 2 national championship games in 3 years. Not saying he's going to get fired or anything absurd, but falling under expectations in these last few seasons, can they get to the Final Four this year, the final weekend of college basketball, and at least get to play in that penultimate game? We'll find out. Earning a 3 seed. They will take on, out of the Missouri Valley, back-to-back tourneys made for this squad after mediocre conference play both years. Only a combined 20-16 record, 9-9 last year, 11-7 this year in the Missouri Valley after the Missouri Valley lost Wichita State. So they've kind of gone down in stature relative to other conferences, yet Bradley has found a way to sneak into the tournament both years under Brian Wardle, who is in his 15th year, led by both Elijah Childs and Darryl Brown, both of which averaging 15 points a game. 5'10 guard in Brown and 6'7 forward in Childs. A little inside out between those two. A dynamic duo. A team that's 25th in college basketball in shooting the 3. A team that's 8th in rebounding. Those are some figures and statistics that you like to see when you're looking at underdogs to pull off the upset, look out, Wildcat fans. The 7 seed, a guy in his first year of coaching, Angel One Howard, played for the Fab Five, could not be more proud to be coaching his alma mater. The kids, as much as they love Beeline, seem to be buying in to Howard just as much. Can he have the success in March that Beeline had? We'll find out. But earning a 7 seed this year, Michigan Wolverines. They have made 3 straight Sweet 16s or better. They have a lot of guys on that roster that knew what it took to win 5 straight games and play in the last game of college basketball on that coveted Monday in April with Jim Nantz calling the game. That's where you want to be. Can these guys be an upset team and get there? We saw back in 2017 a 7-seeded Michigan squad upset 2-seeded Louisville, get to the Sweet 16, ultimately ran to a buzzsaw at that point. That was Oregon. But that was a scary team. This team has some similarities, a lot of experience. You got guys on this roster that have won, 9 NCAA tournament games in their career, entering their senior year. Can they add more to the list? They will play the 10 seed. This is a team from a mid-major that was able to sneak in to the tournament. One of the last teams to not have to play in that first 4 game in Dayton, the Wichita State Shockers, led by Greg Marshall. Coming off a first tourney missed in 7 years, you didn't want to let that lead to multiple missed tourneys. And he got the team back on track, did just enough to get them into the tournament, and they will take on Michigan Wolverines in this region in St. Louis, Missouri. Next up, 2 seed out of the Big East, somewhere in Middle America, from Omaha, Nebraska. They'd love to be playing in Omaha, but given that they host an NCAA tournament sub-regional, they have to go to St. Louis. It's, of course, the Creighton Blue Jays, led by Greg McDermott. One stat that surprised me that, honestly, I wasn't even aware of, they've never made it to the Sweet 16 under Coach McDermott. Looking as a 2 seed to change that this year with a loaded crew of players that we'll get into later when we start to get into the predictions. The last team in this top left Midwest regional teams will be playing if they move on to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 games in Indianapolis. That's where you want to be in the second weekend. North Dakota State at 23-8, coached by David Richmond in his 6th year, back-to-back tourneys made. For this team, they have the experience, led by 2 senior guards. Vinny Shaheed, 5'11", senior guard, averaging 18 points a game, and Tyson Ward, a 6'6" guard, averaging 17, 7, and 3. So a dynamic duo that Creighton's going to have to contain a little bit in order for the Blue Jays to keep dancing on in late March. That concludes the Midwest Regional. And just at first glance, man, these 14, 15, 16 seeds look really good. And I think a product of that is due to the coronavirus, canceling the conference tournaments, not the NCAA tournament. You thought you caught me. Not the NCAA tournament, canceling the conference tournaments, the majority of them. We had 20 teams granted automatic berths for winning their regular season. So the majority of these conferences are putting in their best team over the course of a 16, 18, 20-game conference regular season. Whereas you take a look at last year, only 13 of the 32 teams that won their conference's regular season moved on as automatic qualifiers to the NCAA tournament, whereas this year we're looking at 27 of the 32. I think that's going to make for the deepest field we have ever seen. I think that's going to make for some of these top squads to be playing better opponents than they're used to that early in the first round. And upsets could be had. This is March, right? It's not anarchy. It's just college basketball, right, John? So moving on from there, we will now take a look at, actually, we'll go to the top right. The number 2 overall seed, excuse me while I grab these papers. This is another team, This was kind of a debate among most bracketologists. Do you have Baylor here? Do you have Gonzaga? Personally, as the selection committee, I will let you know. I saw Baylor's resume as a whole being more impressive. Given those 11 quad one wins to only the 2 losses, 16 quad one and 2 wins combined, you've got stellar wins like at Kansas, at Texas Tech, at Florida, neutral Villanova, home against Arizona. Some really great wins there to go along with home Butler, home West Virginia, home Texas Tech. Could go on and on with this team. That's some really great wins, faltered late. But props to Scott Drew, who in 17 years at Baylor has taken a program that was down in the dumps, nothing, and they aren't a blue blood, but they're becoming a household name. Had never been higher than a 3 seed before. Last time they reached number 1, this should be noted, a few years back, they ended up losing the Sweet 16. We'll see if they can exceed that this year. Time will tell. They will play out of the MAAC, Siena. Coached by first-year coach Carmen, I can't read my handwriting, Mascherello. I butchered that terribly. This is the first NCAA tournament that Siena has made since Fran McCaffrey was there. Yeah, the guy that's developed him a program that may have the National Player of the Year in Luka Garza, Yeah, he was at Siena back in 2010. That was the last time this team's made the tournament. So kudos to first-year coach Carmen. They will need all the luck they can get playing that fierce Baylor defense. Sorry, this will be a play-in game. They may not get to play Baylor. They will play against the Northeastern Conference champion, Robert Morris, with a 19-14 record, coached by Andrew Toole, who is in his 10th year. Second time making the tourney under Toole, but first since 2015. So had a little 5-year drought, back in. I'm sure he'll hope to get in more than every 5 years from here on out, but this is a good start. Next, going down the line, we have 8-seeded LSU Tigers, coached by the American gangster, Will Wade himself. Second straight tourney appearance coming off a Sweet 16 where Will Wade did not coach due to some FBI scandals. We will see if those scandals get cleared up in some documentaries coming up that I'm very much looking forward to. But again, having a little program that he's starting down in Baton Rouge. They aren't just going there for football and Coach O anymore. They're coming to play for that American gangster, Will Wade. The 9 seed that they will face out of the Pac-12, most bracketologists had this team higher, I think primarily due to their net ranking at 14. It is the Arizona Wildcats. Sean Miller, I'm going to try to start my own Rothsteinism. Sweatier than a whore in church, Sean Miller. I mean, you look at that guy, he can sweat through a suit. It's incredibly impressive how much perspiration he's got going on. And I'm talking about from the jump. Clearly a very nervous guy. Maybe it's all those FBI allegations. Who knows? This is kind of, as I look at it, a regional of FBI allegations. We got another guy coming up that also falls in line with the sweatiness. Maybe I just gave away who I'm talking about. But anyways, Arizona Wildcats. In their top 4 quad 1 games, they lost each one by 5 points or less. So their best quality win is Stanford. That's really what held them back, along with having a quad 3 loss, along with only 3 quad 1 wins, along with only 9 quad 1 and 2 wins combined to go with a total of 11 losses. So that's ultimately what, to me, had them as a 9 seed, and to be frank, the very back end of the 9 seed. Almost had them in as a 10. Sean Miller never made a Final Four, 3 Elite 8 losses in the last 10 years. Missed tourney last year after making 6 straight prior to last season. The 5 seed, I've already probably given it away. It's Bruce Pearl's team out of Auburn, 25-6. His now 6th year. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. At Auburn. Can't believe it's been that long. 3 straight NCAA tourneys. And this is a guy that really has shifted his image. Went to work for ESPN for a little bit after some scandals. I don't quite remember what they are, honestly, at Tennessee. And this looks like a fun guy to play for. If you're a Bachelor, Bachelorette fan back home, great guest appearance on Peter's season. I could go on and on a rant about Peter and Victoria F. and, Barb. I could go down the line. I'm not going to. This isn't a Bachelor podcast. Sorry, Trent. I got no luggage for you to haul out. We're going to get back to the selection show. Bruce Pearl, 25-6 squad. Again, coming off that Final Four year, returned a lot of players. 5 of his top 6 leading scorers are seniors who know what it takes to win 4 straight and get a chance to play in that penultimate game. I guarantee you they're going to be thinking about coulda, woulda, shoulda against Virginia, probably for the rest of their lives, as unfortunate as that is. They will be playing a dangerous Stephen F. Austin Lumberjack squad coached by Kyle Keller, 25-3. Makes the NCAA tournament after a 14-16 season last year. Now in his 4th year, you can no longer say, oh, he's just winning off Underwood's guys. You could easily have said that last year. That now, hey, that Underwood's guys are gone, he's struggling. Well, he picked it right back up in his 4th season. 6 of the last 8 years. They have 28 wins, but sorry, three were D2, so we don't count those. 6 of the last 8 years, they've had 27-plus wins. They've won 20 of their last 21. And oh, by the way, back in late November, they beat Duke at Duke to snap some 15-year non-conference home winning streak in the hundreds of games. Coach K not too pleased with that one. Dangerous team. Bruce Pearl squad better be ready. At the 4 seed, a team that is very dear to my heart. I'll explain when we get into the predictions, but particularly love one guy on their team, coached by Kevin Willard. That guy obviously is Miles Powell out of the Big East at 21-9, 14-4 overall in the Big East. Seton Hall, a team that had 7 Big East road wins this year, a brutal conference where you got to play everybody twice. Going 7-2 on the road in that conference is a feat that, in my opinion, you should get a hang up banner for. That is absurd. 5 straight NCAA tourneys they've made. Only 1 win in that time. Kevin Willard, Miles Powell, and the crew looking to change that this year. They will take on 13-seeded Akron, the Zips, coached by John Gross in his 3rd year. First tourney for the school since 2013. I'm sure LeBron James is probably going to reach out some deep inspirational message about how much he loves Akron and has always been a believer in their squad. You're going to get something like that coming from them. 3 of their top 4 scorers are seniors, so very much a veteran-laden squad. 0 quad 1 and 2 wins, which is concerning, but when you look deeper into their quad 1 and 2 games, played Louisville on the road to 6 points. Who would expect them to win that? Went into Morgantown, which is tougher than a weekend at your in-laws, according to John, and almost won, lost by 10, put up 84 points on a stout West Virginia defense. So clearly they can compete with the big dogs, and certainly not a team that Seton Hall should ever take lightly. Next up, last year's defending national champions, coached by Tony Bennett. I know, John, your Rothsteinism for them is Virginia basketball, a thing of beauty, and I think that's perfectly fitting. Tony Bennett, my Rothsteinism for him, not just the best guy at the game of basketball, the best guy at the game of life. What a guy this is. I truly believe karma, God blessed him for Coach Bennett, how graciously he accepted defeat against UMBC, congratulated them, took it upon himself, stayed positive when he brought back the main core of his guys and led them to a national championship. I mean, I think that's right up there with 83 NC State as one of the greatest stories ever told in college basketball history. We're going to see a documentary in 30 years about this team, maybe even sooner. They felt similar to the Cardiac Kids of NC State. And Man, I wouldn't mind if they made another run this year. Finished second in the ACC. They seem to dominate that conference year in, year out, despite how difficult it is. But this is the worst seed they've been in the last 7 years, and they're no doubt going to have a target on their back. The team that they will play, 11 seed, probably would not have gotten to the tourney had they not won the Mountain West Conference. I'm talking, of course, about Utah State. Coached by Coach Craig Smith, they've been 54-15 in the last 2 years. Their second straight tourney after missing for 7 consecutive years, led by Sam Merrill, who hit 6 3-pointers against that stout San Diego State defense to lead them to a 3-point victory, including the one to clinch it late in that one. Averaging 20 points a game is the 6'5" senior. Moving down the line, the 3-seeded Maryland Terrapins, coached by Mark Turgeon. They won in Atlanta. At least I heard this from John. Didn't back up, look if it was factual. Back in 2002, now trying to win back in Atlanta. 18 years later. Coach Turgeon in his 9th year. Mark with 5 tourneys in 6 years, but has never gotten past the Sweet 16 in those 6 years. Highest Maryland seed they've been since 2002, so there's that connection. Yet again, led by Anthony Cowan, the 6-foot senior guard, averaging 16.3, 3.6 boards, 4.7 assists, can do slightly a little bit of it all. They will be playing a team that I was so incredibly impressed with that they got in the tournament out of the CAA, coached by Joe Mihalik, the Hofstra Pride, and boy, did they have pride. 27-win team last season, but didn't make the big dance. Lost their stud, Justin Wright Foreman, who's player of the year in the CAA, a superstar scorer, and they hadn't made the dance since Jay Wright in 2001. Last year felt like the year they fell short. They bounced right back and get in. Led by Bowie, who's averaging 18.2 points a game as a 5'11 senior guard. Eli Pemberton also chipping in 17.6 and 5.6 a night, 6'5 senior guard. This team can score some points. They haven't played a very tough schedule, but they do have a win at UCLA. So clearly, the few Power 6 teams that they have played, actually the only one, they're able to take care of, and on the road, no less. So a dangerous team that Maryland will have to show up for. The St. Mary's Gales are our next team as a 7 seed, coached by Coach Randy Bennett. His 13th straight 20-win season, an impressive feat. 3rd time making the dance in 5 years. And let me tell you something, folks. One thing I've learned over the years is Australians and New Zealanders can shoot the basketball. Something about those people from Oceania. 4th in 3-point percentage this year. And also they take care of the basketball. 17 in turnovers, led by Jordan Ford, 6'1 senior guard, averaging 22 and 3 this season. For the Gales, have had a heck of a season, and maybe the toughest we've seen the WCC in a long time, if not ever. They will be taking on a team that had somewhat of a controversial resume due to their terrible road record. It's the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, first time making the dance since 1991. You better believe they're going to party like it. They ultimately went 4-9 in Quad 1, wins at Purdue, home Seton Hall, home Maryland, home Wisconsin, along with 5-1 in Quad 2. Their only bad loss really was a neutral loss to St. Bonaventure. They did enough to get in the dance. They've got enough Quad 1 and 2 victories, only 11 losses. It wasn't by a whole lot. They were without a doubt evaluated with some of those last teams in, but ultimately they were able to earn a 10 seed, a very similar resume to a Minnesota of last year. The 2 seed, as we're rounding out this regional, will be coached by Leonard Hamilton. Had a lot of success of late, certainly not a blue blood, but he's developing a little bit of a program there in Tallahassee with a 26-5 record, number 1 in the ACC, Florida State Seminoles. They had wins at Louisville, home Louisville, the sweep of Louisville, winning at Florida, neutral win over Purdue, several quality wins, ultimately 14-5 in quad 1 and 2. The highest seed ever received in school history, and have now made 4 straight tourneys. The scary part, only one senior out of their top 5 leading scorers. They'll be back next year, so they've kind of got 2 runs at it. They'll be playing the Anteaters out of the Big West, UC Irvine, coached by Ross Turner in his 10th year. 2nd straight year in the tourney, and look out, Florida State. They were able to upend 4-seed Kansas State last year, move on to the round of 32, and held their own, nearly moving on to the Sweet 16, but ultimately Oregon took care of them. 5 of their top 6 scorers are seniors. So here you've got a more underclassmen team in Florida State that has probably more hope for the future than this year, although this year does look bright, whereas UC Irvine wants to go out swinging, get back to that round of 32, and maybe further as a very talented 15 seed. Moving along now to the bottom right portion of the bracket, we have half the teams now announced. The number 1 seed, number 3 overall seed in the tournament, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, coached by Mark Few. 21 years it's been, in 21 tournaments. Coach Few has made incredible what he's built up in Spokane, Washington. They have been nothing short of amazing. This is the 4th 1 seed he's received, only made 1 Final Four. We'll see if he can improve on that percentage this year. He's got the help of a lot of guys. They're the highest scoring team in college basketball by nearly 5 points a game. They have 7 players averaging 9.8 or more, with their leading scorer averaging 17.5. This team is deep. This team is poised. This team has played, as I mentioned, the WCC has played tougher than it has in any year I can remember. And so you know they always will play top-notch non-conference opponents. Played Oregon on a neutral floor, went to Arizona, played Michigan on a neutral floor, went to Washington, to Texas A&M, played North Carolina at home. Now, some of these teams didn't have the years that they were anticipating, so their non-conference strength of schedule wasn't as strong as it usually is, not really by fault of their own. And ultimately, they took care of business, only 2 losses this season. They will be taking on, out of the Big South, the Eagles of Winthrop, coached by Pat Kelsey, their first tournament in 3 years and only 2nd in last 10 for that school. This is another high-scoring opponent. This is going to be a very fun 1-16 matchup. Winthrop could get the brain speed out of them, right? If you're going to play up-tempo against a Gonzaga team that loves to play up-tempo, that could be a recipe for disaster. But if Gonzaga's struggling to score and Winthrop is on, this is a team that's 1st in the country in rebounding, 9th in assists. Now, one negative component, they're 341st in free throw percentage. So hopefully the Bulldogs don't foul them for their sake. But they were able to beat St. Mary's at St. Mary's by 2. So clearly they can compete with top-notch WCC opponents. We'll see if they can hold their own against Gonzaga. Moving down the line, 8-seeded Colorado is who's next up, coached by Tad Boyle in his 10th year. Haven't made the tourney in 3 years after making 4 or 5. He was a little bit on the hot seat. Their top 4 scorers, they have 3 juniors and 1 sophomore. So this is a pretty young team where next year is probably going to be the year, but we'll see if they can't make a little noise out in the West Coast, upset Gonzaga in Spokane maybe in the 2nd round after taking care of their first opponent. Then they'd get to go to LA, stay nearby. You never know, maybe the Buffaloes could make a run. They'll be taking on 9-seed my alma mater, coached by Lon Kruger out of the Big 12, the Oklahoma Sooners, with a 19-12 record this season. The Sooners with 5 quad 1 victories, 6 quad 2, 11 overall. This is their 7th NCAA tournament in the last 8 years for a football school. As an alma mater, one thing I'm a little worried about, are they getting comfortable being around a 32 team? Despite returning a lot of their guys next year, I kind of see around a 32 team for them yet again, given the recruiting class they're bringing in, what's returning. I like, but not completely thrilled. Hopefully they don't get into a rut and start staying there, but wouldn't mind a win over Colorado nonetheless. Moving on further down in the bracket, out of the Big Ten, coached by Chris Holtmann in his third season, the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is their second 5 seed in 3 years, third straight tournament they made. Last time they were a 5 seed, South Dakota State gave them everything they wanted and then some. They've got the Wesson brothers. Andre, a senior this year, the 6'6" forward, averaging 9 and 4 for them. They will take on, out of the Ivy League, the first team to shut down the first conference, the first team to benefit from it, the Yale Bulldogs, coached by James Jones, who has also been going at it, similar to Mark Few, 21 years. What's amazing to me is he didn't make the NCAA tournament for the first 16 years of coaching at Yale. 16 consecutive years not getting to go to the dance. Has now made it 3 of the last 5. Really started dominating the Ivy League when many would think Harvard should be doing that. Harvard being a little bit of a disappointment, despite Harvard having swept Yale this year. Yale with the better record at 11-3 in conference versus Harvard's 10-4. Yale gets in. They've had a 20-win season 4 of the last 6 years, which has been a huge part in them getting into the tournament. One interesting opponent they played, Penn State, lost to them by 2 back in November at Penn State, a team that Ohio State was able to lose to by 14 on the road. Now, they did beat them 30-plus at home, but they lost on the road more than Yale did. Could Yale pull off the upset? Next, we have 4-seeded Louisville Cardinals, coached by Chris Mack. We've known him most of his career from Xavier, now at Louisville for 2 years now. Second straight tourney since leaving Xavier, lost in the first round last year. They're led by Jordan Nwora, the 6'7" junior forward, averaging nearly 18 points, 8 rebounds a game. This guy's a flat-out stud. I mean, this guy's the type of guy that can almost single-handedly lead you over teams that are more talented than you. He is that type of talent. They were able to beat Duke at Duke this year. The concerning part to me about this team is their next 4 toughest games, though. Not only did they lose all of them, they lost every one of them by at least 8 points. And 3 of the 4 they lost by at least 13. That was at home against Florida State, at Kentucky, on a neutral floor against Texas Tech. Not a great sign. Maybe Nwora and Mack can get it figured out, and they can go on a little bit of a run. They'll be playing 13-seeded, and this team will probably be the underdog I'm cheering for the most. They have just had phenomenal story after phenomenal story. It is the Vermont Catamounts at 25-7, coached by John Becker in his 9th season. This is their 12th straight 20-win season, developing a bit of a powerhouse in the America East. 4th straight 26-plus win season. 1 game was a Division II game. In their 3rd tourney in 4 years, led by Anthony Lamb, 6'6" senior forward, averaging 16.7, 7.1, and 2.5. Why I love this team so much is what they did on senior night for their player. I feel terrible, but I've forgotten his name. A recruit who got in a car accident, was in a coma for an extended period of time, but the kind of guy Coach Becker is, I got goosebumps thinking about it, he still gives this young man a scholarship, knowing that he's not going to play significant minutes for him ever. An incredible Christ-like type move that I love to see, you love to hear about. On top of that, they got a leader in Anthony Lamb that's one of the best mid-major players in college basketball, and he's been one of the best mid-major players for a while. A kind of guy that could win America East Player of the Year for 4 straight years. Unheard of to win Conference Player of the Year 4 straight years. But what I respect so much about him is he has been open and upfront about mental health issues, talking about the depression that he goes through. We all know that's a dilemma, an epidemic in our society that needs to be gotten a hold of. And so when you have top-tier guys like that, guys that are in the media, that I'm sure it's incredibly difficult to admit those things, for him to be able to do that, I just have the utmost respect for Coach Becker, utmost respect for Anthony Lamb. And as much as I love Chris Mack, Jordan Nwora, I wouldn't mind at all if the Vermont Catamounts get a move on. They have not done it in Anthony Lamb's career. Would be great, great, great to see. Next, we've got 6-seeded BYU, a dangerous squad this year, coached by Mark Pope. I'm going to try at my own Rothsteinism again. Traditional Mormon school led by the great Catholic Pope. That is Mark Pope. 23-8 this season were the Cougars. First year as coach and first tourney for BYU in 5 years. Honestly, Dave Rose, he did a tremendous job. There's no doubt about that during the Jimmer Fredette years. How electric was that squad? How fun were they to watch that team out of Provo, Utah? But honestly, really underperformed the last 4 years, and I think it was time for him to go. As tough as it is for as much as he did for that program, I really think it was. Coach Pope went to Utah Valley, the powerhouse that is Utah Valley, right? I mean, goes from 12 wins to 17 to 23 to 25, Utah Valley out of the whack. Now at BYU, having great success in his first year. This is a guy to look out for. If he's a BYU lifer type of guy, I don't know if he is, but if he were to be, could he overtake Gonzaga in the WCC and become maybe the most premier mid-major conference team? He's on pace. I will say that. Don't want to make those bold claims that he will, but gosh, he's doing a great job very early in his career. They will be taking on East Tennessee State, the 11 seed coached by Steve Forbes. 24 or more wins, 5 straight years under Forbes, but this is only their second tourney. So they've struggled to get over the hump in the SoCon Conference Tournament, haven't done enough in terms of non-conference scheduling or wins to get in as at-large. This year they were able to win at LSU, also wins at UNC Greensboro, home against Furman, who's a respectable opponent as well, and played Kansas on the road to 12 points, Kansas the number 1 overall seed. So this lets you know they can play with most anybody, given that they kept it somewhat close against the Jayhawks. Their 5 leading scorers, they have 3 seniors, 1 junior, 1 sophomore. So this is also a pretty veteran team. Look out for the Buccaneers. At the 3 seed, we have also from the West Coast, similar to BYU, the Oregon Ducks, coached by Dana Altman in his 10th year up in Oregon. They've made the tourney 7 of the last 8 years and have won a game in the tourney every single year. 2 Sweet 16s as 12 seeds, 1 Elite 8, 1 Final 4. So if you're going to say, Izzo is March of the Big Ten, honestly, I think you could have made the argument about Beeline as well. Altman is that for the Pac-12. Led by Peyton Pritchard, one of the best point guards in the country, if not the best. A guy averaging 20.5 points a game, a 4-year guy, 4.3 boards, 5.5 assists. The 6'2 senior guard could make some noise in this dance, has been into 1 Final Four. Could he make it 2 in a tremendous career? They'll be taking on 14-seeded Belmont Bruins out of the Ohio Valley Conference, beat Murray State in a great game for the OVC Championship in what felt like a road game for them, the way the Racer fanatics packed that house out. Coached by Casey Alexander in his first year. This is the first year for Belmont that a coach has coached this team not named Rick Byrd since Belmont has been Division I back in the late 90s. Not only that, but they lose Dylan Windler to the NBA last year, who put on a show in the NCAA tournament and almost single-handedly knocked off the Maryland Terrapins, who were loaded with NBA talent and are even better this year. Adam Kunkel has had one of the craziest turnarounds that we've seen in NCAA history. Went from scoring 2.3 points a game last year to this year, the sophomore guards pouring in 16.5 and doing a lot of that from the perimeter. Next, as we move along, we have 7-seeded out of the Big East, Ed, cool as the other side of the pillow, shout out Stuart Scott Cooley. Ed Cooley in his 9th year at Providence. They made the tourney for 5 straight years before missing last year. They're led primarily by Alpha Diallo. Raise your hand if you feel like Alpha Diallo's been there since about 2009. I mean, when's this guy going to leave? My goodness, don't get me wrong. I love watching him play, but I feel like I've been watching him since I was a young child. The 6'7" senior guard, I think in his 10th senior season, averaging 14.1, 7.8, 2.5. In my opinion, what's scary about this team in a negative manner is that they have too much guard scoring reliance, but have a stout defense, had some good road wins this year at Nova, at Butler, at Marquette. Quality Big East road wins, a tough thing to do. So this team is without a doubt very good. I want to say they have not made it out of the first round, maybe out of the second round under Cooley in those last 5 years. I think it's something like a 1-4 record. I could be wrong, just going off memory there. They will be taking on, out of the Big Ten, the Hoosiers of Indiana, coached by Archie Miller. What I thought about doing, just strictly out of spite and just to be a scumbag, is put Archie Miller and the Hoosiers playing in Dayton's arena, playing at his former team's venue, the Flyers. How ironic would that be? That he's coaching blue blood, pretty much the only blue blood that's not a blue-colored team, the Hoosiers, of course, red. This Indiana program hasn't gotten past the Sweet 16 since 2002. And here you have his old Flyers squad, coached by Anthony Grant, the number one, I guess I just gave that away. Yeah, they're going to be a number one seed out in the East region. And, God, that's just got to be eating him alive. That he could be coaching, ain't no stopping Obi Toppin. Instead, he's going to be fighting to get out of the first round. So we will see what the Hoosiers can do. The 2 seed in this region, the West region, a very dangerous team out of the Mountain West Conference. Only 2 losses all season. Got road wins over BYU, neutral win over Creighton by 31 points nonetheless. Win at Utah State, neutral win over Iowa by 10, beat Utah State on the road by 9. An impressive San Diego State Aztec squad. Their second tourney in 3 years for Dutcher and the team. If you guys remember, 2 years ago, Malachi Flynn, who's their star this year, the 6'1 junior guard, averaging 17.6, 4.5, and 5.1, putting on a phenomenal season. They played Houston 2 years ago. They threw it up to Flynn, a Christian Laettner type of pass, turnaround shot from the three-point line, perfectly executed. Flynn just misses. That Houston team then goes to lose by a buzzer beater to Michigan. Michigan goes on all the way to the finals. So what could this Aztec squad have done 2 years ago had Flynn hit that shot? Maybe they'll make a little run deep this year. They're certainly poised to with the 2 seed. They'll be taking on 15 seed out of the Horizon League, Northern Kentucky, a team that's made the tournament out of the Horizon 3 of the last 4 years, coached by first-year coach Darren Horn. Horn's not been a head coach since 2012 at South Carolina, yet gets the Norsemen into the NCAA tournament this year, but they got a tall task ahead of them playing the Dayton Flyers. So we have, let's see, that makes 53 of our 68, God, I'm terrible at math, 51 of our 68 teams announced. The remaining 17, let's get them started. I've already given it away. The number 1 seed in this remaining East region, the last number 1 seed in the tournament, the Dayton Flyers, a show-stopping team led by Ain't No Stoppin', Obi Toppin, credit Big Cat for that little saying. The 6'9" sophomore forwards averaging 20 and 8, and it seems like half of those points are coming off dunks. This guy is electrifying. We've seen between the legs. We've seen 360s. He is just a force to be reckoned with that really can't be stopped. 14 wins, then 21, then 29 for Coach Anthony Grant after Archie Miller left, clearly proving they don't miss Miller all that much. The last 2 years, I'm going to go on my soapbox a little bit here. The last 2 years, only 2 A10 teams have gotten in. I just previewed that another one will be getting in later on. Congratulations, Richmond. Go Spiders. Before that, 3 or more teams made the A-10 in 11 straight years. So is this conference a mid-major? Yes. Are the Dayton Flyers playing Power 6 programs night in, night out? No, they're not. But the A-10 has been a staple mid-major that's honestly been a conference that's been better than some major conference is most seasons. And so to go 18-0 in this great conference that is the Atlantic 10, for both your losses to have come in overtime by 2 to Colorado on a neutral floor, by 6 to number 1 overall seed Kansas on a neutral floor. Take the Dayton Flyers serious. And I don't think there could be a much better story. Dayton, this community, has dealt with some tragedy of late. They had a mass shooting in their community. And no one supports college basketball better than Dayton. That's why this town, this city, is awarded the first 4 games every single season to kick off the NCAA tournament since 2011. This community eats, sleeps, breathes, bleeds college basketball. I mean, even if the Flyers aren't playing in Dayton, they just want to go watch great college basketball, and I think it'd be something if this squad made a little run. Just going to give you a warning, a preview. This is the deepest region, top to bottom, without a doubt, in the entire field. When I read some of these teams off to you, it's going to be anybody's guess as to who will get through this absolute gauntlet of a region. They will take on 16 seeded, coached by Joe Jones, out of the Patriot League, Boston University. Coach Jones in his 9th year. First NCAA attorney since Pat Chambers left, now at Penn State back in 2011. Great for Coach Jones. He's had some success there, but never gotten over the hump. Did it this year, and this is honestly kind of a scary team. When I look at them, they've got some nice pieces. They've beaten South Carolina on the road. Were able to beat Colgate to get in the tournament. I don't think Dayton will have any trouble, but they're still going to have to show up and get the job done. The 8th seed is the USC Trojans, 22-9, coached by Andy Enfield in his 7th year. Crazy that it's been that long at USC. Only 2 tournaments he's made in the previous 6 years and had missed the last 2. This year able to get in as the 8th seed. They will be taking on very tall task led by Marcus Howard, averaging 28 points a game, 3.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists. It is, of course, coached by Wojo, the Marquette Golden Eagles, coming in at 18-12. Yeah, that's not a whole lot of wins, but when you looked at, they have 5 quad 1 wins, 6 quad 2 wins. You had to put this team in the field, and I thought they were deserving of the 9 seed. Have not gotten out of the first round since Wojo has been there. It's a huge what if for this squad. The what if is that, what if the Hauser brothers never transferred? If they never transferred, we could be talking about this team as a contender. One Hauser went to Virginia. Will be sitting out for a season. Will make that team extremely dangerous next year. Be a perfect fit. Other Hauser to Michigan State had to sit out as well and will also be a great addition. If those two, I don't quite know why they transferred. You combine those 2 guys who can shoot the ball from the perimeter and add a little size to go along with Marcus Howard. This could have been a scary team. Unfortunately, really Howard's the only one that scares you. Yes, they do have Sakar Anim, but they just don't have enough pieces around those guys, in my personal opinion. The 5 seed in this regional, out of the Big 12, tougher than a weekend at your in-laws. The West Virginia Mountaineers coming in at 21-10, 3rd in the Big 12, coached by Bob Huggins, who, again, time flies when you're having fun. Amazing to believe it's been 13 years. Previously K-State, previously before that Cincinnati, a guy that knows what it takes to get to the Final Four. They have some really good wins this year. Home win against Baylor, neutral win against Ohio State, home win against Tech, neutral win Wichita State, neutral win Northern Iowa won at OSU. 6 quad 1 wins, also 6 quad 2 wins to go along with that, with the number 2 ranked strength of schedule in the country, number 4 non-conference strength of schedule. So they were still able to rack up quite a few wins with not that many losses, with a very difficult strength of schedule, and that's why they were awarded a 5 seed. Only missed 3 tourneys in Hugs, 13 years in Morgantown. Missed one last year, bouncing back this year. They have no easy task, as they'll be taking on a team that's very familiar with what it's like to be a 12 seed upsetting a 5. That's the Liberty Flames out of the Atlantic Sun. Last year, really an upset team. Lipscomb was a team that I honestly liked to make the second weekend had they gotten in the dance. They proved that they were worthy of making the tournament, in my opinion, by going all the way to the finals of Madison Square Garden in the NIT. They weren't as much of a threat this year, given the amount of seniors that they lost from that team in Nashville, but Liberty took advantage yet again, back in the dance for Richie McKay, who's in his 5th year. 59 wins the last 2 years, looking to get that up to 60 if they're able to pull off the upset of West Virginia. The 4 seed in this region, about the dangerous 4 seed I've ever heard in the NCAA tournament. Michigan State Spartans at 22-9, coached by not January, not February, but Izzo, which is March. Coach Tom Izzo in his 25th year for the Spartans. Made Final Four last year. You look back 20 years ago, what happened then? 2000? The Spartans were national champions. Could Coach Izzo do it 2 decades later? We see that on occasion in college basketball. You look at Kansas, won it with Danny Manning in 88, win it in 2008. Could 20 years be the special number for Coach Izzo and get him his 2nd national title? They're led by Cassius Winston, my opinion, the best point guard in the country. You got other great ones out there. Great scoring point guard in Marcus Howard. A great overall point guard in in Peyton Pritchard. But you give me one point guard, I want Cassius Winston as my leader of my team. Xavier Tillman, also 6'8" junior forward, putting up 14 and 10. Aaron Henry, 6'6" sophomore forward, chipping in 10, 5 and 3. This is a very balanced team that got hot at the right time. They'll be taking on the Mean Green of North Texas, who are in the 13 seed behind Coach Grant McCaslin. First tourney for the school in 10 years. Good for them, but I can't think of a worse team to have to play in the first round than the Spartans of Michigan State. Now, this team's 12th in 2-point field goal percentage, 15th in 3-point percentage at nearly 38%. So you like to see good shooting teams when you're picking upsets. Of their 4 leading scorers, it's a freshman, a sophomore, and 2 juniors. Their 2 leading scorers are a freshman and sophomore, both chipping in about 14.5 points a game. Javion Hamlet and Umaja Gibson. So for me, I think this is more a learning experience for this team, not that they really have a legitimate shot of upending Michigan State. Moving down the line, we have 6-seeded Illinois out of the Big Ten, a 20-10 record under Brad Underwood this season. First tourney for Brad since leaving Oklahoma State. Would have loved to have put Oklahoma State in the dance, had them play Illinois, his former team, or would have loved for Illinois to get the 5 seed and potentially play Stephen F. Austin, also his former team. Unfortunately, those things didn't happen. They're led by, of course, Ayo, 6'5", sophomore guard, averaging 17, 4 and 3, and Coffee Cockburn, who PFT says last name literally translates to McDonald's lawsuit. The 7-foot freshman center, averaging 13 and 9. I'll let you guys do that wordplay in your head. For the 11 seed, the last 2 teams in the dance. These actually weren't the last 2 teams in the dance. They were the first and second of the last 4 teams in. But I've already spoiled this one. The Richmond Spiders out of the Atlantic 10 with a 24-7 record. Chris Mooney in his 15th season there. First tourney since Sweet 16 as 12 seed in 2011. They made a Sweet 16 run, Could they do that here as an 11 seed, one below? They will be taking on the last team in the NCAA tournament that's really up for debate. Some teams that are probably going through your head right now. Xavier, Texas Tech hasn't been called yet. But we're going with the same state, the Texas Longhorns. Out of the same conference, Tech will be left out. Texas, 19-12. Shaka Smart's 5th year, the former VCU coach who's been to a Final Four as an 11 seed before. Comes in pretty hot despite the most recent loss at Oklahoma State. They'd won 5 straight in the very difficult Big 12 before that. If they're able to bounce back, get the win over Richmond, that would now make 6 out of 7. Could they then go on a run to a Final Four, again as an 11 seed, which Coach Smart has done before? He hasn't gotten to the round of 32 yet since he's been at Texas, now in his 5th season, looking to change that. This team's really been injury-plagued this year, but they may find a way to get it done. Next up, the 3 seed. You haven't heard their name called yet. The blue blood of all blue bloods, led by 5-time national championship coach, Coach K. Perhaps you've heard of him. The Duke Blue Devils at 25-6. They came in with 5 quad 1 wins, including a neutral win over Kansas, the number 1 overall seed, a win on the road at Michigan State. So if they were to see them down the line, perhaps in the Sweet 16, they've got to like that. Have not made the Final Four, though, since 2015, and have had back-to-back Elite 8 losses despite some really talented squads. Shocker, yet again, they're talented with some very young teams, led by very young players, led by 3 freshmen and a sophomore in Trey Jones. That's really the leader from the point guard position. They'll be taking on the 14 seed out of the Big Sky, Eastern Washington, a team that's similar to Duke. Duke's 2nd in points per game. This team is 6th in points per game. And they have not made the tourney under Coach Shanty Leggins, I think is how you say that, who is in his 3rd season, but a team that can put the ball in the hole. Jacob Davison, 6'4" junior guard, averaging 18.4. And then Mason, the 6'8" senior forward, averaging 17.2 and 9. Along with Kim Aiken Jr., the 6'7" sophomore guard, who's putting up 13.3 and 9.7 rebounds, as a guard. So this team likes to run. This kind of reminds me of a similar Gonzaga-Winthrop matchup. This Duke-Eastern Washington matchup, similar styles. Sometimes in those head-to-heads, you get a little upset. Now, for the 7th seed, the Hawkeyes of Iowa, led by Luka Garza, who I agree with John, I think deserves Player of the Year, putting up 24 and 10. That's 4 more points and 2.5 more rebounds than Obi Toppin's putting up. And he's doing it in the toughest conference in college basketball this year, facing brutal big men night in and night out. This team ultimately struggled in top half quad 1 games with a 1-6 record. Also had 2 quad 3 losses to show for it. So that's why they deserved a 7 seed in my eyes, not higher where some people had them, some bracketologists. This is their 5th tourney under Coach Fran McCaffrey in the last 7 seasons. They'll be taking on, out of the SEC, the Gators of Florida, coached by Mike White, who's had great success in 5 years there. The 4th straight tourney that they have made. But to be quite frank, this is a disappointing year for this team. When they brought in Kerry Blackshear Jr., along with some of the recruits they had, Scotty Lewis, Trey Mann, I thought this team was going to win the national championship. This team was my favorite to begin the year to win the title. For whatever reason, they've just never clicked and gelled. Their top 6 most important games, if you will, so far this year: home Baylor, home Florida State, at Butler, at Kentucky, at LSU, home Kentucky, 0-6. They simply cannot get the job done against elite teams, along with some losses they probably shouldn't have had. 19-12 team, ultimately have enough good wins with their 5 quad 1 wins, 4 quad 2 wins. No terrible losses and a very tough strength of schedule, top 20 in strength of schedule, that got them in where they're at. But disappointing year, but still a scary team given all that talent. Next up, we are now down to 2 teams. At number 2, the Villanova, basically a Fortune 500 company, according to John, coached by Jay Wright. The Villanova Wildcats at 24-7 this year. 10 Quad 1 victories, 6-1 in Quad 2, 7 Big East Road wins. You know, for Jay of late in the NCAA tournament, it's been pretty boom or bust. This is now their 6th time in 7 seasons where they are receiving a 1 or a 2 seed. The 5 previous times, really from the stretch from 2014 to 18, 2 times they won the national championship as a 1 or 2 seed. The other 3 times, they were out by the end of the first weekend. So it's been boom or bust for this team. They will face a scary opponent. I don't care if it's Iowa or Florida. That either of those teams should concern you. And they will be playing the University of Arkansas Little Rock out of the Sun Belt, coached by Darrell Walker in his 2nd year, coming off a 10-win season. Coach before him had 22 wins in 2 years, simply could not replicate what Chris Beard had created. But in Coach Walker's 2nd season, he's had a heck of a year, leading this squad to a 15-5 Sun Belt record. Honestly, this team has 0 significant seniors, so they'll be a force to be reckoned with in the Sun Belt next year as well. Look for them maybe to receive, 12, 11 seed, maybe make some noise next year. I don't think it's going to happen this year for them. So now the field of 68 has been announced. Who are the top 4 teams, you may be asking, that did not make the dance? For me, the number 1 team that didn't make the dance that I struggled with the most, really what it came down to is for about the last 7 at-large spots. The 29 of the 36 I had already had selected. 7 of the last 8 spots, the last 7 spots were between 8 teams. Xavier was the team that was ultimately left out. Why was that? Only 3 Quad 1 wins in 14 attempts. You go back to last season. There were only 5 teams that had double-digit Quad 1 losses. Every single one of those 5 had a minimum of 4 Quad 1 wins. The lowest win percentage in Quad 1 games of a team that got into the NCAA tournament as an at-large last year, 25%. Xavier was sitting at 21.3%. And ultimately, the loss against DePaul in the conference tournament did not help matters one bit. Arguably their worst loss the entire season. So, and then when you also look at another precedent that would have had to have been broken, this team, Xavier team, had 3-game differential between their wins and losses. They were 17-14. The least amount of wins in the last 8 years to get in the NCAA tournament was 18. The biggest gap between wins and losses has been 4, which has been done 1 time each of the last 3 years. 3 19-15 teams have gotten in. So they would have had to break multiple precedents in order to get to the tournament. And I simply did not feel comfortable stating that they deserved to be in based on their resume that they'd had. My next team in that missed it, I had higher than most. It was the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Most of you are probably still asking, what about Texas Tech? Where have they gone? You compare Oklahoma State and Texas Tech's resume side by side, Oklahoma State's is simply better. Texas Tech, the only thing you can point to is the net ranking. In my opinion, the committee uses the net as a grouping system, not as a standalone. Where, okay, because this is where you fall in the net ranking, you should be seated between here. That's not what it's for. This team went 1-6 in the top half of Quad 1. They were 3-10 overall in Quad 1. That's, again, for you math majors out there, below 25% win percentage in Quad 1 games. Would have had to break a precedent to allow them to be in. They were 4-3 in Quad 2. So you're talking about a team that is 7-13 in Quad 1 and 2 games. The committee commonly likes to look at your Quad 1 and 2 games when you've had 20 opportunities and you've only won 7 of them against tournament caliber opponents, some of which didn't even make the tournament. That's concerning. You're 3-7 on the road. You got a 180 non-conference strength of schedule, among the worst in the Big 12. I just could not put them in despite their high net ranking. You look at OSU, also Tech strength of record, 56. Their quad score, which is a formula I'll explain later, 22. The lowest quad score in last year was 25. Oklahoma State went 1-6, top half of quad 1, exact same as Tech. They went 3-9 overall in quad 1, 25%. They met that mark. 7-5 in quad 2. So they only had one more loss than Texas Tech, but yet 3 more quad 1 and 2 victories. They were 5-7 on the road compared to 3-7 for Tech. They had a 105 non-conference strength of schedule compared to Tech's 180. They had a better resume in every facet except the net, which I can live with all of the other results rather than just pointing to the net and saying that's what I'm going by. Couldn't do it. The last team that I had missing the tournament that was relatively close, again, another solid net ranking, not much other than that, was the Stanford Cardinal. A 68 strength of record, pretty abysmal when it comes to teams that get in the tournament. The lowest, they were my last team in, UCLA. They had a 61 strength of record, but they had 6 quad 1 wins. A team doesn't get left out simply with 6 quad 1 wins. Stanford, 1-5 in top half of quad 1, 4-7 overall, 3-3 in quad 2. Also had 2 bad quad 3 losses, a 226 non-conference strength of schedule, a 4-6 record on the road. Everything was just slightly worse than those teams that made it, that were on the bubble, but ended up on the right side of it. So those 4 teams will be getting to host, hopefully in their sake, for their next 3 games in the NIT, though, not in the big dance. All right, we will look to nearly wrap up here. Next things I want to get into, and I've already mentioned them briefly, but just explaining why we've got some storms here, making a power outage upcoming. That's not good here in Edmond. Geez, scared the bejesus out of me. So an explanation on the committee. So the NCAA committee said, hey, Coleman, due to these coronavirus scares, we aren't going to meet up. You're going to be the committee this year. Wink, wink. So how I got into this, I've always been a diehard college basketball fanatic. But I started to follow Joe Lunardi and his bracketology at a young age. Then I was like, you know what? I want to see what other bracketologists are doing. Started following Jerry Palm. Then that eventually led to me finding the Bracket Matrix or Bracket Project. What is that? It's a community of bracketologists that rank themselves up against the committee based on how they project their bracket to be each and every season. So you've got about 130 veterans, which are guys that have been doing it a minimum of 3 to 5 years, most more than 5, along with 60 couple newbies, which is the classification I fall in, guys that have done it for 1 to 2 years. This is now my 3rd season, but I don't get to compare it to the committees, unfortunately. So in the first year of me doing it, I pretty much just broke down the quad wins and losses. For those of you that don't know, those are separated by the net, which is a ranking evaluation tool that the committee has deemed valuable, where they break up games. A quad 1 win is a win against a home team ranked 1 to 30, a neutral team ranked 1 to 50, or an away win ranked 1 to 75. And gradually the quality of the games deteriorate as the teams go down in the rankings. So you have quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. A good way to group your wins and losses to see how well you've done in your top games, see if you have any bad losses. And so basically what I did is I just kind of looked at those sheets and broke it down by quad wins and losses, but I didn't dive into the significance, perhaps, of those wins and those losses, because not all quad 1 win is created to be equal. A win at home against number 30 isn't as valuable as a win on the road against number 1, simply put. So my first year, I got a score of 343. How those scores are calculated is for every team you get correct in the tournament, you get 3 points. So 3 times 68 would be 204. Every team you get on the correct seed line, so I predict a team to be a 6 seed, the committee agrees with me, you get 3 bonus points. Every team that you're 1 seed line off, you get 1 bonus point. If you're 2 or more seed lines off, you get 0 bonus points. So the average among all these bracketologists in the world was 337.1. So I was 5.9 better than the average, which is how you're ranked, how you do relative to the average. Joe Lunardi also had a 344. Jerry Palm also had a 343. So in my first year, to tie guys that are paid to do this for a living was something that modestly I was pretty proud of. Frankly, though, I felt like I got lucky. My second year, I dove a little more into the nitty-gritty of it all and began to look inside the resumes, a little under the hood, if you will, at the quality of the quad 1 and 2 wins and losses, which I felt would have had me do better. Problem being, I'm going to blame it on spring break. All right? So spring break the year before, I went to OU at the time when I first started as a bracketologist as a junior. Spring break fell on Friday of the first round of the NCAA tournament. So me and my buddies all had planned to go down to Florida. Well, when the Virginia-UMBC game ended, the famous upset, UMBC 16-1, we immediately drove down to Florida. Well, it's fine. I had already released my bracket. The Sunday prior, I was cooped up in my apartment. It's not like I was going to be studying for midterms or anything stupid like that. I was trying to replicate what the committee was going to do. Fast forward to next year, where spring break fell a week earlier for us in Norman. We had to leave on Friday of the conference tournaments. So Saturday we get down there, we do our thing, have our fun. Sunday, wake up, same thing, do our thing, have our fun. And so by about 3:30 Central Time, an hour and a half from Selection Sunday, I decide, I better focus up, if you will, and try to produce a seed list. So I do that, but barely finish in time, actually submit it right at 5 o'clock, just before the selection show is about to start. And because of that, I make a simple typo error. I put Syracuse at 36, so the last 9 seed, and Baylor at Syracuse at 37 as well, so the first 10 seed, when I meant to put Baylor as one of those two. So not only did I miss out on getting a team in the NCAA tournament, 3 points, but I missed out on some seed bonus points, missed out on at least 5 points right there, just off boneheaded mistake. So ultimately, the average score that year was 341.9. I got a 342. So 0.1 better than average, despite that mistake. Had I not made that mistake, I would have finished similarly to where I did last year. So in full transparency, I'm ranked 27th out of 62 bracketologists in the Noomies selection, so slightly better than average. However, this year I feel like I improved significantly and would have had a very similar bracket to the committee, and here is why. So what I did this year is I broke down the data by conference. Each Power 6 conference along with a separate tab for mid-majors. It's a much more apples-to-apples comparison when you're comparing teams with similar quad 1 and 2 games and when the majority of the opponents that they played outside of the mid-majors are the same teams due to having so many interconference games, and you have head-to-heads to look at as well. So I also used the past to determine the future. I looked at last year's resumes, went down the official seed list, and had to find at least 2 reasons as to why each team was put in front of the other on the seed list. What begins to become apparent is last year's resumes look incredibly similar to this year's. So you can start to get an idea of what the committee's thinking when they make these decisions. And if I can find at least 2 reasons, hopefully more than that, as to why to put Team X over Team Y, then at least I can make an argument as to why I did it. On top of that, I also looked at quad score and strength of record. Strength of record basically tells you how other teams would have done if they would have played the same schedule as you. So it's a very good determinant of what you have done for the schedule that you played. Quad score is also really helpful as well. It's a simple formula. Every quad 1 win, you get 4 points. Quad 2 win 3 points, all the way down to quad 1 getting 1 point. The formula is reversed for losses. -4 points for quad 4 loss, -1 points for quad 1 loss. So it rewards you for your good wins and punishes you for your bad losses. why that helped. If you look at last year, the worst quad score team to get in was Florida with a score of 25. Only 5 teams had the same or better quad score than them that did not get into the dance. So it was very telling from the committee's point of view that they also highly valued those quad scores. Lastly, I looked at past precedents. Things like fewest wins to get into the tourney of the last 9 seasons. Things like most losses that got in. Margin between wins and losses. Quad score rank. Net rank. Things of that nature to help me put some boundaries on these are the teams that I'm looking at. If you don't meet those qualifications, I'm not even going to give you a glance. Yeah, the committee could break some of these precedents, so I gave it a little bit of leeway, but they're never going to significantly shatter a precedent. For example, let a 500 team into the tournament. So that's my explanation as to why I did what I did. I hope that makes more sense as to why the teams that got left out. Now, quickly, because I'm running significantly over time, sorry about that, folks, I'm going to run through my predictions. I hope you make your predictions alongside me at your home. For some reason, I cannot find... There it is, Kansas's resume. So, obviously taking Prairie View over North Carolina Central, and then I will take the Jayhawks over Prairie View. Easy decision there. I will then be taking the Cougars of Houston over the Arizona Wildcats. Simply because this Houston team, 5 of their 8 losses have come by 2 points or less. 7 of their 8 by 6 points or less. Now, this is a young squad. But I think through that adversity, through as many close games as they played, I mean, they're this close to being a team that you're looking at 30-1, 28-3. So I think they're a lot better than their record actually says they are. And a team that, honestly, I don't think Kansas is going to be exactly thrilled they're having to play in the round of 32. And that's going to be an exciting matchup due to Quentin Grimes playing his team he just transferred from, the Jayhawks. Next, I've got Butler, the Bulldogs, doing just enough to knock off Cincinnati. I think this team's a little bit more balanced than Cincinnati is. Significantly better offensively, slightly better defensively. And Butler will take care of business. Move on. I have Wisconsin, the Badgers, beating New Mexico State. Chris Jans doesn't get it done yet again. Wisconsin's got 7 players that have averaged 8 or more this year. Very balanced. Top 6 scorers, no seniors. I really like this team. They take care of the basketball. They knock down free throws. They're pretty balanced, better defensively than offensively, as almost always is a Wisconsin coach team. But I like them to move on. Next up, sorry folks. Next up, we will have Pat Chambers of Penn State going up against Mick Cronin of UCLA. In this one, I like Mick Cronin. I'm sorry, UCLA. I know you guys haven't been to the tourney in a while. It's been 9 years. But UCLA has one loss since February 6th, playing some of the hottest basketball in college basketball at the moment. And I like them to move on and get past Penn State doing enough. Next up, we have Kentucky going against Bradley. Spoiler alert, my largest upset of the tourney is about to take place right here. What I like about this Bradley squad is how well they shoot it from the 3, how well they rebound. They've got a little inside-out game in Brown and Childs, both averaging 15 points a game. I think this is a dangerous team. Conversely, we've seen Kentucky susceptible this season to opponents in the Missouri Valley. They lost to Evansville, who went 0-18 in the Missouri Valley. That's not the sole reason I'm making my decision, but plays a factor for sure. Give me Bradley in that matchup. We'll have an 11-14 in the next round. Michigan, Wichita State. I just really like this Michigan team. I can't help it. When you got Simpson, Teskey, Livers, Wagner, Eli Brooks. 3 of those guys, 6'7" or bigger. Lowest of the guys averaging 10.6 points. Most of the guys averaging 12.9. This is a selfless team. Juwan Howard's doing a great job coaching this squad. I like this team moving on over the Shockers of Wichita State. Creighton over North Dakota State. I'm going to make it short and sweet. Creighton, the Flyers, are going to be too much for North Dakota State to handle. Now, one thing to look back on, if North Dakota State gets a lead late, they're first in the country in free throw percentage at just under 80%, 79.8. Moving on from there. I don't know what you guys would consider a bigger upset, Bradley over Kentucky or this one. The number 1 overall seed goes down. We've seen it before when Northern Iowa was able to knock off Kansas not all that long ago. Quentin Grimes, revenge game. Really going to take it out on Devon Dotson. You got Caleb Mills, a freshman guard, averaging 13.2 a game. Nate Hitton, averaging 10.6 and 8.7. They got 3 other guys averaging 8 or more. Kansas, not that great, a three-point shooting team, 34.4%. One of the worst teams from the line in the country. If Azubuike gets in foul trouble, if Azubuike is being hack-a-shacked late, I could see those things playing a role. Houston pulls off the major upset in a close one. Butler in Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's just flat out better than Butler. I take Butler offensively. I like Wisconsin more defensively. I love Wisconsin's balance. I think they have more depth than the Bulldogs. Wisconsin, Big Cats team, will still be dancing into the second weekend. Next up, UCLA, Bradley. Bradley's Cinderella story ends. UCLA keeps moving on to the Sweet 16. That'll have been their 3rd straight win, given that they had to play the play-in game. From there, I like Michigan, the Wolverines, to upset Creighton. Yes, that's absolutely right. I have an 8-4-11-7. Commonly, we see this region get a little crazy. We have seen 9-seed Kansas State play 9-seed Kansas State play 5-seed Kentucky, 11-seed Loyola Chicago play 7-seed Nevada here before. So it's gotten even crazier than this, folks. I look for this year, as crazy as college basketball has been, no elite teams really standing out. I look for this tournament to be absolutely insane. I have Michigan over Creighton. All right, moving on from there. In the Houston-Wisconsin matchup, I like Wisconsin here. Houston's run comes to an end. Wisconsin, again, I continue to point to the balance, taking care of the basketball, knocking down free throws. They can do it on the offensive end, do it on the defensive end. They will go on to the Elite 8 under Coach Greg Gard. From there, Michigan, UCLA. We're going to have a Big Ten Elite 8 in this regional, in Indianapolis nonetheless, where they have had their Big Ten tournament there commonly before. Michigan will then move on to face Wisconsin. Interestingly enough, when these teams have met up in the past, Michigan lost at home to Wisconsin by 7. Let me just check real quick. Does Wisconsin have guys that have played in the Final Four before? No? Michigan does? Oh, okay. I'm going Michigan. That's primarily the reason, just the veteranness of this team. A Xavier Simpson, a John Teskey, a Livers who's been there before. I love this team to go on, make some noise, and get in the Final Four. They're my first Final Four team, the 7-seeded Michigan Wolverines. Moving on from there, let's go into the top right portion of the bracket, where we've got Baylor, Siena. Easy, real quick, move along. Baylor, you're still playing. I have Siena over Robert Morris. LSU against Arizona State. I like the Tigers in this one. I think they're a scary team. Now, they are extremely limited defensively. They're flat out bad defensively. But they've got 5 guys scoring 11 or more a game. 3 chipping in 13 or more, led by Skylar Mays, the senior, averaging 16.7. This team can put the basketball in the hole. They're 19th at free throw percentage, 23rd in 2-point percentage in the country, 9th in points per game, and according to KenPom, the 4th best offensive team in the country. I like them over Arizona State in this matchup. Yes, I think that is Arizona State in this matchup. Moving on from there, Auburn, Stephen F. Austin. I've got upset here. I really don't like that Auburn's best win is at home against Kentucky. I don't like that this team is 309th in 3-point percentage, yet 36th in attempts, 290th in free throw percentage, 55th according to KenPom in defense. I don't think this team is what they were last year, and I think they're still trying to play like who they were last year. They really don't scare me. Stephen F. Austin isn't going to be afraid of anyone. If you win in Cameron, you automatically are fearless. This team's won 20 of their last 21 games, as hot as anybody in the country. I don't care if you're playing the school of the blind for those 21 games. You're going to be feeling good about yourself, having some momentum, playing some good basketball to win 20 of 21 games against Division I opponents. Stephen F. Austin with the upset. From there, Seton Hall against Akron. Miles Powell is a textbook. Shout out to Titus and Tate here. Kimba candidate. What do I mean by that? Well, we all remember, I hope you all do, the Kimba Walker run where he led UConn, who was 9-9 in the Big East, the 9 seed that year, and the absolutely loaded 16-team Big East, to 5 straight wins in the Big East tournament. Then got a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, 6 straight wins in the NCAA tournament. Now, Kimba Walker averaged about 24, 6, and 5 that season, when his next leading scorer, Jeremy Lamb, averaged about 11.5. So clearly the offense went through him. But not only that, this team was elite on the defensive end of the floor. They averaged giving up 55 points a game over the course of the NCAA tournament. That's unheard of. They gave up 94 points in the entire Final Four. So a Kimba candidate is someone that's not only just a great offensive player, because you could argue Marquette has that, and Marcus Howard, where they have one guy that they, is their primary form of offense. But Marquette's not good defensively. Seton Hall is. And honestly, I think their role players are underrated. I'm not saying Miles Powell, as great as he is a Kimba Walker. Maybe he can be. But I know this guy's got dog in him. I witnessed it when they were 16-12 last year, on the verge of missing the NCAA tournament, about to play the number 1-2 teams in the Big East, Marquette and Villanova. He put the team on his back. Goes for about 35, then 24 to win those two. Then beats Georgetown, and then goes for, a ridiculous amount again against Marquette, hitting some high difficult shots to push them on to the NCAA tournament. I think he has better help, more experienced help this year, and I think this team can make a run into my soapbox. I've got Seton Hall, needless to say. Moving on. You've got Sandro, the 6'11 junior forward, averaging 12 and 6. Quincy McKnight, of course, 12, 3, and 5. Romero Gill, the 7'2 center, 7.8 and 5.6. And Jared Roden, 9 and 6.4. This team's extremely balanced. They know how to win away from home. They've got 7 Big East road wins. I absolutely love this team this year to make a run, and I don't think it's going to stop just off this first one. They will move on and will knock off Akron. Virginia, last year's national champs, playing 11-seeded Utah State. Virginia is as elite defensively as they've ever been, which is an amazing statement to say. This team is first in the least amount of fouls, 5th in worst 2-point percentage that opponents have, 17th in 3-point percentage, 5th in rebounding, 2nd in assists, 1st in points per game. That's terrifying when you're an opponent coming in there realizing how much Virginia will shut you down and force you to play their style. Now, on the offensive end of the floor, it's as woeful as it's ever been for a Tony Bennett coach team. 271st in 2-point percentage, 315th in 3-point percentage, 350th in free throw attempts, 292nd in rebounding, 314th in assists. This team just struggles on that end of the floor. Fortunately, what I've seen, especially late in ACC play, is Clark. Kihei Clark, the little guy that could, the 5'9" sophomore guard that we saw come up huge time and time again in the NCAA tournament, that's averaging 10.8, 4.2, and 5.9 this year. I think he could lead them and provide a spark on that side of the floor. And you got 4 guys that played significant roles in Huff, Diakite, Clark, and Braxton Key last year on a team that they witnessed win 6 straight games. I think that speaks volumes. Despite Utah State being a good team, I've got Virginia marching on. Maryland and Hofstra, this one I had to think about for a little bit. Reason being, Maryland's 290th in three-point percentage, 300 in turnovers forced. Meanwhile, Hofstra's 21st in three-point percentage, 8th in free throw percentage. Clearly a great offense, got 5 guys scoring 10.6 or more points. That's the kind of team, those high-paced teams that shoot the 3-ball well, that can pull off upsets. I think Maryland wins one, but I think it takes a lot out of them, and they win it close, very close. St. Mary's, Rutgers. From a committee perspective, I was fine with Rutgers' resume. From a personal perspective, I don't like it. I don't respect it. I don't like that they've struggled so much away from home. Not to mention they've also lost on a neutral floor to Michigan, on a neutral floor to St. Bonaventure. 2-11 when they aren't playing at Rutgers. I don't like that. The St. Mary's team, 4th in three-point percentage, 17th in fewest turnovers, 16th best offense in the country. Oh yeah, they've got Jordan Ford. I'm taking the Gales in that matchup. Now looking at Florida State, UC Irvine. Florida State, as a Leonard Hamilton team typically has, they've got size, they've got length, they've got athleticism. This is a team where all of their significant players are 6'4" or taller, and they're deep. Shocker. I love Leonard Hamilton's style in that he doesn't like to get one and dones. He likes to get these 4-year guys that will buy in, plays 9-10 deep, and they just play together as a team. Love a Leonard Hamilton coach squad. They will move on and beat UC Irvine. No upset for the Anteaters this season. From there, Baylor LSU. Call me crazy, I got another 1 seed going down. I've watched a decent amount of Baylor this year, and I do not like how stagnant they get at times. I do not like how 3-happy they get at times. I don't think they go to Gillespie enough. I think they're too guard-happy, a little undersized. I like what they've got returning. They'll be a threat again next year. But I think LSU is the perfect team that they're susceptible to be beaten by, given that I think LSU can just flat out outscore them. I don't know if Baylor can keep up if LSU gets hot. Given their talent on the offensive end, I think they can. Stephen F. Austin, Seton Hall, not going to think long on this one. Seton Hall, Miles Powell will be too much. I love that for Seton Hall. If they play a 13 seed Akron, then get a 12 seed, then get an 8 seed. If that were to occur, like I predict, look out. The Pirates could be moving on to the Elite Eight and maybe further. Virginia and Maryland. Like I said, I think Hofstra will wear Maryland out. I think they're going to push the ball up the floor. I think they're going to score at a high level, and it's going to be a closer game than many anticipate. And I think then UVA is going to wear them out that much more. Force Maryland to play their kind of game, make them turn the ball over, shoot the ball with 2 seconds left on the shot clock. Maryland will get frustrated. Virginia will move on to the Sweet 16, second weekend. St. Mary's in Florida State. As much as I like St. Mary's, love how they shoot the basketball, love my guy Jordan Ford. I like Leonard Hamilton. I like the depth on that Florida State team. I like the balance. They can do it on the offensive and defensive end, specifically the defensive end. They have so few losses this year, playing a pretty solid schedule, 41st in the country. I like Florida State as the 2 seed to move on, knocking out the Gales. From there, Seton Hall, keep it coming. Eat another dub, Jameis. They're going to go on to the Elite Eight behind the sharp shot of my main man, Miles Powell, who a dog is the ultimate compliment I can give. Miles Powell is the ultimate dog of college basketball. Florida State, Virginia. I simply like Florida State. I think they're much more balanced. I think their size could pose a problem for Virginia, and I like them moving on. So now in the 2 versus 4 matchup, you've got Florida State, Seton Hall. Seton Hall also doesn't lack in size. They go 6'2", 6'4", 6'6", 6'11", 7'2". They can match up with Florida State and then some. I again point to the 7 Big East road wins. When you're talking about winning at Villanova, at Butler, at Marquette, at Xavier, at St. John's, at Georgetown, at DePaul, a team that can win away from home, I think that prepares you for playing on neutral floors in late March. Florida State has some good wins as well. Yes, I like Seton Hall here. I forgot to mention Florida State has split with Virginia in the year, but I went Florida State there. I'm going Seton Hall, Kevin Willard, Miles Powell and the crew, as Stephen A. Smith would say, on to the Final Four. Would love to see it for that kid. In the next region, I'll try to move a little quicker now. Gonzaga, Winthrop, going to make it simple. I like Gonzaga here. They're simply too good offensively, and honestly, I like a blowout. Winthrop wants to play Gonzaga style. Gonzaga's going to say, bring it on. They might beat them 40. I mean, it could be a 102-80 game. Next, we've got Colorado, Oklahoma. I was pretty torn on this one. Maybe it's my alumni bias kicking in. I like OU in this game. I like the 3-headed monster, if you will. Don't want to call it a monster. Mini-me beast, whatever. That was a weird phrasing. It's getting late. I need to shut this off pretty soon. Doolittle, Reeves, Manick, all combined for 14.5 or more points a game. All 6'5" or taller. I like their length. I like, more importantly, what OU does on the defensive end of the floor. And I think this team is going to get the job done. OU, no real bad losses that concern me. Colorado does have some. Ohio State and Yale. I've got Ohio State moving on. I think Yale, although they're a great shooting team, 27th in three-point percentage, 41st in two-point percentage, they don't foul you. They make you beat them. I simply don't think they're quite good enough. You're talking about a team that has 2 quad 1 and 2 wins versus a team that has 12. Granted, Ohio State's had many more chances, but I think Ohio State's simply better. Chris Holtman will move on as the 5 seed. Again, Louisville, Vermont. I was torn on this one. As I've stated, I don't like that Louisville has, in their top 5 games they played, the top half of Quadrant 1, they're 1-4. And 3 of those 4 losses came by 13 or more. However, I just think they're simply better than Vermont. I think Anthony Lamb, as good as he is a poor man's Jordan Nwora. And then, obviously, Louisville's going to have better complementary pieces where they get the job done. BYU against East Tennessee State. Although I greatly respect East Tennessee State, 8th in two-point shooting percentage, 13th in steals. A pretty balanced team for a very small major. I guess kind of a mid-major. But I think BYU's too good offensively and good enough defensively to get the job done. You got Childs back averaging 22 and 9. TJ Halls, who's also been there since 2002, in his 18th season at 40 years old, averaging 14 points, 5.7 assists. And Jake Toulson also chipping in 15.2, 4.8, and 3.9. That's a tough trio right there to deal with. BYU will be too much. Oregon and Belmont. I see a great West Coast matchup upcoming. I think Oregon's a little overrated, given that their best 4 wins all came by 2 points or less. 3 of them by 1 point. I think they've overachieved this year, won some close games that they probably shouldn't have, and aren't as good as maybe the record says they are. However, they'll be good enough to beat Belmont, despite Belmont being a great 3-point shooting team, great passing team, great scoring team. Oregon's got more pieces there. than Belmont does. Closer than many expect, but Oregon wins. Providence, Indiana. Again, the road wins of Providence. At Nova, at Butler, at Marquette. Also home Seton Hall, home Creighton. I like how they performed against top-notch opponents. I wouldn't quite call Indiana a top-notch opponent, but Providence will be ready. They're as hot as anyone right now. They'll do enough to knock off the Hoosiers. San Diego State, Northern Kentucky. Although San Diego State's coming off a loss, I think this will be a confidence builder game. I don't think Northern Kentucky is all that great. San Diego State, great shooting team, great defensive team, third in points allowed in college basketball. They knock down their free throws. They're balanced. They've got a great go-to guy in Malachi Flynn. I love this team to move on and play up through late March. So now in the round of 32, I've got Gonzaga over OU pretty handily. I think Gonzaga wins both of their first-round games very handily. I've got Louisville over Ohio State. I thought about this one for a little bit. Don't really necessarily love either team, but I think Chris Mack, Jordan Nwora will be too much for Ohio State's Caleb Wesson, and they will get the win. The Cards will move on. BYU, Oregon. I'm going upset here. These teams are similar. Both elite offensively, a little suspect defensively. I think BYU is less suspect than Oregon is. I think BYU is more well-rounded than Oregon is, and I am going BYU. From there, Providence, San Diego State. I got San Diego State. Too much talent. They're experienced now. Too good defensively. Providence isn't a great offensive team already, as is. They're too reliant on their guards. I think that'll be an issue in this game. San Diego State will win. Gonzaga, Louisville. I like Gonzaga, and frankly, by quite a bit yet again. I think Gonzaga has the easiest regional up until the Final Four. I think Louisville is far and away the weakest 4 seed. I think Ohio State may be the weakest 5 seed. That 8-9 matchup does not scare me. Those 12-13s really don't scare me. So I like Gonzaga to move on to the Elite Eight pretty easily. BYU, San Diego State. I think this is a great, close game. You have a battle of styles. BYU loves to push the pace, score a lot of points. San Diego State really likes to slow you down, not give up much. I think ultimately defense will win out here. San Diego State will move on. I think we got a Titanic mid-major matchup. I hate that we have to see them in the finals. It's great that it's in LA. They're both out on the West Coast. The Zags are going to win. It's going to be a close one. Typically defense beats offense, but not here. The Zags, as deep as San Diego State is, the Zags are deeper. This is a loaded team. Can't wait to see what they do in this tournament. And finally, I got a 1-2 matchup, and I got a 1 seed coming through. Not crazy upsets, right? So 3 Final Four teams have been selected. Let's find out who the last one is. We've got Dayton against Boston. I like the Flyers here. Boston doesn't do a whole lot that scares me. I feel like I said they did earlier. I don't mean that. I don't know where I got that from. They don't scare me. I like Dayton to move on. South Carolina now, Southern California, USC, commonly referred to obviously, taking on Marquette. USC doesn't impress me all that much. Your best win's home Arizona, who I had as a 9 seed. Next best win, neutral floor LSU, who I have as an 8. And then your next best win probably is at Oregon State, who doesn't make the tournament. Meanwhile, Marquette got home win over Nova, home win over Butler, and I guess I made a slight mistake here, but it was hard to pair these 8-9 teams up, given how many of them had played each other. But USC and Marquette, I guess, had already played. Marquette won by 22. I'm taking the Golden Eagles here. Marcus Howard will be too much for USC. We had 4 8-9 Pac-12 teams, and then the other 8-9s that I'd selected already played each other. That was the difficulty in setting up these matchups. So from there, We've got 5, West Virginia against 12, Liberty. You got to take a couple, at least one, 12 over 5. West Virginia does some things that scare me. They really struggle to score the ball, especially if Emmett Matthews Jr. is not performing at a high level. They don't really have a go-to guy. They rely so much on the offensive rebounding, rely so much on turning you over. When Liberty takes care of the basketball, they're 8th in turnovers. If they're able to do that, I think Liberty can win by as many as double digits, get back into the round of 32, and have a 30-win season yet again. Michigan State, North Texas. I've got Michigan State easy in this one. North Texas does not scare me very much at all. Moving on from there, I have Richmond over Texas. Texas, I think, still reeling from injury, still reeling from an Oklahoma State loss. I got the Spiders moving on, and ultimately I have the Spiders upsetting Illinois. I like how good a shooting team the Spiders are. 59th in two-point percentage, 45th in threes, 12th from free throws. They start 5 juniors, so many would think that this team is kind of 1 year away. They got a neutral win over Wisconsin. They got a win at Rhode Island, win at Davidson, at Duquesne, home BCU, home Davidson. I like some of the wins they have, especially that Wisconsin one. And I think they'll pull off the mini upset over the Illini. Duke over Eastern Washington in that game. This is going to be a very fun, high-scoring game. I think Eastern Washington will ultimately keep it close. I like the high scorers that they have. I like how they pass the basketball, can score obviously at a high level. Duke, at the end of the day, will have too much talent for Eastern Washington. Iowa and Florida. This is a brutal game. I hate that you got a National Player of the Year playing a team that's as talented as Florida. Ultimately, I think Florida's talent will win out despite disappointing this year. And I've got Florida moving on, not the Hawkeyes. Next, I've got Villanova over UALR. Don't have to talk about that one that much. You got Sadiq Bey, you got Colin Gillespie, you got Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, you got Jermaine Samuels, Justin Moore. They're pretty loaded. They're pretty balanced. A little 3-happy. Good, not great defensively, but ultimately I still very much like their team. In this Dayton-Marquette matchup, I hate it for Marcus Howard, but his career is going to have to end in this game. The Flyers will be too much. They're too good offensively. Not only that, they're good enough defensively, whereas Marquette is simply not. Liberty and Michigan State, I like Michigan State big. Again, similar to Seton Hall, who got to play a 13-12, I think it's a huge advantage for Michigan State that they'll play a 13 and a 12, win both games fairly easily, rest their guys. Duke-Richmond, I like Duke in this one. Just too much talent for the Spiders. I know that seems to be a common theme, but it just truly is the case when you got Kerry Vernon Jr. averaging 18 and 9, Trey Jones 16-4, 6.5 assists, Cassius Stanley 12.5 and 5, Hurt 10 and 4. They're young, but man, they can play. They're more balanced than they've been in the past. They're a better shooting team than they've been in the past. And so I like the Blue Devils this year. My only concern is how they played of late. Hate the 22-point loss at NC State. Don't like the loss at Virginia. Don't like the loss, where's the other one? At Wake Forest. Since then, yes, they beat NC State at home. Yes, they beat North Carolina at home. But so is most everybody in the ACC. That's just a quad 2 and a quad 3 win right there. So I think had they played in the conference tourney, if they'd done any damage at all, I'd feel a lot better about it. But they didn't get that opportunity due to the coronavirus scare. Florida and Villanova. As talented as Florida is, they just never quite gelled this year. Nova, Fortune 500 company, gets out of the round of 32. When they do that as a 1 or 2 seed, they win the national championship. Will they do that this year? Dayton against Michigan State. I absolutely hate this game more than any game I have to pick over the entire bracket. games that rivaled that, Louisville, Vermont, Gonzaga, San Diego State, but this is my least favorite game. I want this Flyers team so bad to move on. However, when your best win is at Richmond, I know both your losses were close, but I have a tough time justifying taking you all the way or even past a Michigan State veteran squad when that's your best win I'm hanging on to, beating an 11 seed. I don't love that one bit. Going Michigan State here. They're playing their best basketball right now. I mean, their last loss was on the 15th. Since then, they win. Let me try and find them. I can't remember where the 218 win was. It looks like at Northwestern, perhaps. Then they, from there, win at Maryland. Then they win at home against Iowa. Then they win at Penn State. Then home against Ohio State. They're hot right now. Have won 5 straight at the perfect time. And it's March. It's Izzo. It's not March. It's Izzo. And they're going to move on to the Elite Eight. Duke-Villanova, titanic matchup in the Garden in the ACC. Back and forth game. Ultimately, I've got Nova. I just simply love those 7 Big East Road wins. Tell me Duke's 4th best win. It's at Syracuse. I don't love that that's their 4th best win this season. Tell me Villanova's 4th best win. At Providence, home Butler, home Marquette, at Xavier. They have some very significant good wins. At Syracuse doesn't cut it for me. I think Villanova's going to win that one in a great close game. Michigan State, Villanova, back to the Final Four. It is for Coach Izzo, in my opinion. So balanced, led by a senior point guard, All-American that you love to have running the show come late March and early April. 10th in offensive rank, 13th in defensive rank, according to Kim Palm. You love to have that balance. A team that can do it on both ends of the floor, because you're not going to have your best for all 40 minutes, 6 straight nights. When you don't, do you have other things that you can rely on that you're good at? Can you score both inside and out? Can you do it on the defensive end? Can you do it on the offensive end when other teams are knocking down shots? If you can do all those things, score in the front court, score from the back court, perimeter, drive inside, it's not defense that wins championships. Sure as heck isn't offense. It's not great guard play, not a great front court. It is balance that wins championships. Michigan State has that. They will move on to the Final Four. So that is our 4 teams. You have an in-state battle in Atlanta between Michigan and Michigan State. Big Ten battle. You've got the 4-seed Seton Hall and the 1-seed Gonzaga Bulldogs playing in Atlanta April 4th and April 6th. In the first game, I've got Michigan State over Michigan. An incredible first year, unlike really much of anything we've seen before out of Juwan Howard. But even though when playing Michigan, these teams have split, Michigan State's the better basketball team. They're hungry, although they haven't been to a national championship game. A lot of these guys have been to a Final Four, given that they had just gone the year prior. So I love this team to go on to the national title game. Gonzaga and Seton Hall. This is where Seton Hall's luck runs out. I think Seton Hall's a little more balanced, but I think Gonzaga is so much better than everyone else in the country, even Duke offensively. Not just because they play in the WCC. I truly believe they could do that in any conference. Maybe not to the extent that they do it in the WCC, but gosh, they can put the ball in the hole and they're deep. I think they get to the national championship game. In that national championship game between the Spartans and the Zags, both Few and Izzo desperate for national championships. Few has been to one, lost against Carolina in a great close game in 17, I guess that was. Izzo hadn't won one since 2000. 20's that special number. 20 years later, with a great point guard, yet again, similar to the 2000 team that Izzo has, Cassius Winston ends his final season. What a better story. Tragically loses his brother early this year. Clearly playing for him, clearly gut-wrenched throughout this entire season. It's been difficult on Izzo to coach him. How do you be hard on a kid that's gone through hell and back like that? Cannot imagine what him and his family have gone through. How special of a moment would it be if he were able to win 6 straight in late March and early April and get to be the first one up there on that ladder cutting down the nets? I mean, gosh, there are so many great storylines we could have in this NCAA tournament. I think that's one of the best ones that you could wish for. So, yeah, my bracket's a little crazy, but the NCAA tournament always is, folks. Don't pick the chalk. It's boring. Live a little. I'm not going to get into the next part like I planned on, talking about conference tournaments or additional teams in the NCAA. Spoiler alert, what I want is 4 more teams have a first 8 games. So I'll do this briefly. But the 4 teams are only allowed outside the top of Power 6. Get more mid-major representation. Those last 4 in originally play the 4 mid-majors. I think those mid-majors win more times than not. Done with my soapbox there. For those of you that have followed along for this long, I can't believe it if you have. You have no idea how much it means to me if you did. Seriously, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, if you took the time to watch this, I greatly appreciate it. It would mean even more if you could reach out. I accept criticism. I love it. How do we grow if we can't accept criticism? Please let me know where I need to improve. Let me know where you think I'm wrong on my bracket. I'll also post pictures of that. Let me know if you liked it. If you didn't, again, like I said, I accept the criticism. I take it all in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this brought a little bit of enjoyment, a little bit of life to you as you're quarantined. And maybe you can discuss with roommates, family, friends, my bracket, and, debate on who you would take all the way given these potential matchups. I plan on simulating them on NCAA Basketball 2010. I'll also post that on Twitter and let you guys know how that goes. But thank you so much. Please stay safe. We don't want sick people out there. We want this coronavirus rate to flatten out. Thank you guys to all you great college basketball content producers that I love and follow. John Rothstein, first of all, Titus and Tate over now at Fox, Joe Lunardi, Jerry Palm, all you great bracketologists out there. I really appreciate it. You guys are my muse. You guys are my inspiration and why I do what I do, and I'm trying to make something of myself doing this. Seriously, bottom of my heart, once again, thank you so much. Have a great rest quarantine period, and let's hope it ends quick.